Hello, in this tutorial we're going to look at assigning values to variables. So I've written a comment here actually, and it's a multi-line comment. So if you want to have one line of comments like this, that's just text on one line, the next line wouldn't be a comment anymore. And that starts with 2 slashes, but you can also have multi-line comments with /*, and they end in */. These stars are just decorative. We don't actually need them. They just look nice, but that's why Eclipse put them in. But this video is about assigning variables. So if you want to have comments on multiple lines, you can just enclose them with /* and finish them with */. Okay, so let's declare some variables here. I'm going to have int dogs equals 8 and int cats equals 3, and we can output those values. So we can say dogs is that, and the number of cats, we're going to have cats. And if we run that, we should see what we expect. Let's check. So yes, it says down here, dogs 8, cats 3. Okay. Now we can change variables as we go along. So underneath this, so underneath the system.out.print lines, underneath those, let's set the number of dogs equal to the number of cats. So I'm going to do that by saying dogs equals cats, and we'll output them again. Let's try this and see what it does. So if I run this now, we see that the number of dogs has been set to what the number of cats was set to, which is 3. This can be very confusing for beginners. So to start with, we have 8 stored in the variable dogs, and we have 3, I should say, I'll use the proper language, I've got 3 assigned to the variable cats. And later on, we say, this is saying here, take whatever number is in cats and assign that value to the variable called dogs, and then we display them again. Remember, your program's working downwards, so it does this, then we output those values, and then we're changing the value in dogs, and then we're outputting the values again. This looks perhaps confusing because it reminds people of an equation. For one thing, it looks as though we're saying the number of dogs and the number of cats is the same, but that's not what we're doing here. This is assigning a value to the dogs variable. When we write a variable and we write equals and then some value, we assign a value to the variable. We're actually changing the value in this dogs variable using this assignment operator. Technically, it's not an equality operator, it's an assignment operator here, this equals. And the value that we're giving dogs is whatever value cats has, and that's 3 because we assign the value 3 to it. So we end up with cats is unchanged, it's still 3, and the number of dogs is 8 by the time we run the program. Let's try this again. So there we go, they're both 3. Now, these variables don't know about each other. They don't. It's not like it's not like the number of dogs is forever linked to the number of cats. So if I write here cats equals 10, what have I done now? Well, the value of cats was 3. I set the number of dogs to the number of cats. I set it to 3. Then I changed the number of cats to 10. The number of dogs is still 3. So we should have dogs equals 3 and cats equals 10. Let's run this. And that's what we've got. Dogs 3 and cats 10. Often I want to output the values of variables multiple times as I go through my program. For example, when I'm debugging, and I like to just put numbers on those. So here I could say 1, and this is 1, and let's say this is 2, and this is 2. Makes it just a little bit clearer, I think, what's going on. So it looks like this. Try that out for yourself. So declare some variables. You can have 2, 3, however many you like. Display them, try assigning new values to them, and try assigning the value in one variable to another, and display them again. And if you like, you can carry on, change the values again, output the values again in your console. It's really worth doing this. So you may be watching thinking that you can just memorize this, and you can up to a point, but you'll quickly lose the thread of what's happening if you don't practice. It's very important to practice this. Try it out practically. The more you do that, the better. Okay, so have a go at this yourself. Try declaring variables, outputting them, changing the values, outputting them again, and I'll catch you in the next video. Until then, happy coding. Hello, in this video we're going to take a look at doing calculations. So let's say I've got some people and their average height is 1.67 meters. So double height equals 1.67. Now let's say I want to know, I've got 7 of these people and they're performing acrobats, and they're going to all stand on each other's shoulders, and I want to know how high 7 of them will be standing on each other's shoulders. So I could just write sysout height times 7, or if I like, I could write 7.0. Here it makes no difference. And if I run that, I find that the answer is 7 of them on top of each other are going to be 11.69 meters high. Now what I could also do is I could write double, let's say, result equals height times 7, and then I could output the result. Let's run this and we should get the same result. Okay. Now there is one thing that beginners often tend to do, which is a bad idea, which is that beginners are liable to give variable names really short letters like R. Occasionally that's appropriate, typically when you're using mathematical equations and the convention is that you would use, for example, an X or a Y, then it makes sense to just use one letter. But most of the time, don't give variables one-letter names because it gets very confusing. Another thing is, in general, don't give variables vague names. So here I've written result. What does that mean? It really tells me nothing about what I'm actually doing here. So it would be better to give it a more specific name. Give it the most meaningful name that you can. You can also even use multiple words in your variables. So I could create a variable called total height. And what I do is, by convention, in the convention that Java usually uses, the first word in your variable has a lowercase first letter. So the variable starts with a lowercase first letter, but any word after that has an uppercase first letter. So total height will be written like this. That makes it easy to read, and it's also meaningful. So if you don't know exactly what you're calculating, you're just kind of making something up to see how it goes, then it might make sense to write result here. But if you possibly can, give your variable a meaningful name. It's better to make it excessively long than to make it excessively cryptic by making it too short and too meaningless. It makes your programs a lot easier to read. Okay, so we're here creating the total height of 7 people stood on top of each other. Now supposing they also have a flagpole. The height of the flagpole I'll define in another variable. So like this, double flagpole height, let's call it, equals, let's say the flagpole is 2 meters high. I'll write 2.0. And in fact, this height here, well, that's not very meaningful because now I've got multiple heights in my program. I want to change it so that we have this height and this height. Wherever I've used height, I want it to say person height. Rather than do that by hand, since I've got multiple versions of it, I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to source, and I'll go to I'm going to go to refactor. So right click it, go to refactor, rename, and type a new name. So I'm going to type here person height, and it corrects all of my variables that are called height. It corrects the specific variable that I want to change. Okay, so we've got the height of a person, we've got a flagpole height, we're calculating the total height of 7 people on top of each other, and I also want to add the height of the flagpole on top, because I want to know how high the whole thing is. 7 people on top of each other, and the top one is waving a flagpole, holding it presumably by the very end of it, using his or her fingertips. Let's run this. I've got to save it first. And so this is what we originally have at 11.69. So if I add the flagpole height, we should get 13.69. Let's add that in. Plus flagpole. And to save me typing out the variable, I can hold down Control and press space. And then it brings up a list of suggestions, and I can hit return to select the first one. Okay, let's run this. And now we get 13.69. One last thing I want to bring to your attention is that this looks ambiguous, this expression, because does it mean person height times 7 and then add the flagpole height, or does it mean person height times 7 plus the flagpole height? So you could add 7 to the flagpole height and then multiply the person height by that. Or you could add 7 to person height and then add the flagpole height. There are rules called operator precedence rules, which we're going to talk about a bit. But for now, when you have an expression like this, and this is really good practice anyway, put round brackets in to make it less ambiguous. So if I put round brackets around this part, that makes it clear that I'm multiplying the person height by 7, and after that I'm adding the flagpole height. Hopefully you understand what I mean, because the other thing that we could have done instead is I could add 7 to the flagpole height and multiply the person height by that, but that gives us something else. It's not what we want in this case. Here we get 15.03. But what I want is to add the person height, multiply it by 7 and then add the flagpole height. Let's run this. Okay, soon I'm going to give you an exercise with this, but there was a lot in that video. So what I would recommend is that type this out yourself and run it and get it working, and then make up your own little program. Think of something you could calculate, no matter how silly. We're not standing on pride here. It's good to experiment with silly ideas. Think of something you could calculate and try to calculate it. And let's put a comment on here, in here, with 2 slashes, and I'm going to write calculate height of 7 people plus a flagpole. There we go. Okay, try that for yourself and then try to make up a little program that does a calculation and see how you get on. And until next time, happy coding.